Welcome, everybody, to the PT Shop Talk podcast. I'm Casey Hansen. Across from me, the always optimistic Nick Doling. I hear
Good morning,
you.
Casey.
Good morning. I hear we have some gale force winds out there.
Not quite as bad as it's been, but it's a windy one down here.
Yeah, I sit in my little bunker here at my studio, so I never even really know how loud it is out there. I do leave the studio. I guess I have a real life, but I can't tell right now how windy it is. I've been upgrading my studio lately. I have a new chair. A little more comfy. It's got a little rock to it. I like that. Ordered a desk as well because I currently am operating on my wife's great grandfather's writing desk from back in the day.
Yeah. Very good. He doesn't have any carvings in there, does he?
No. Stains, lots of coffee stains. But people were smaller back then, so like I can't even fit under it. So I have to be like 2 feet away from it because my legs don't fit under it. So needs an upgrade. I went to the local Office Max. I'm not sure what it is. Yeah. Didn't have anything I like, so I said, well, like everything I do, I'm just going to order it from Amazon. And we're sitting around Sunday. They're like, "Oh, your desk has been delivered." Wander outside to find my desk. Zero desk. So I'm in the process of finding my desk. I don't know if you've ever had anything lost in the mail.
No, we haven't really had that happen.
No
not
porch
for quite a while, which is amazing because we order so much, especially around the holidays. We order so many things. You know what? You're talking about desks, and that, obviously your grandfather didn't carve anything in there. That must have came around in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because like every desk in Carrington had like the band Kiss carved in the side of it or something.
Yeah.
And
that was a big.
Other profanities.
We went obviously to other schools for like recitals and things. And I think it was rugby where there was a kid in a class below me carved, I believe it was either his initials or Maddock into their piano.
Yeah.
They were not happy about that. Our school had a bad reputation and it was warranted completely.
Bad boys in North Dakota. Was Maddock, were you guys, as far as like, you mentioned football a while back, were you guys like a co-op with anybody?
Not when I was around, other than track, I guess Leeds and Maddock. And now Leeds and Maddock are co-op for everything. But when I was there, it was just Maddock. Try not to invite them to the school. That was what other schools' philosophy was.
Yeah. We were just wondering. Interesting stuff.
We were definitely the annoying school. So we had a lot of inappropriate cheers.
Yeah, I don't think you were alone there. We were pretty obnoxious.
Yeah.
We had a fan base that famously got banned from a bunch of hotels in Minot, like in the 95 state wrestling tournament. So,
state basketball was always a jam. I have fond memories of that.
Yeah. Where do they host that in North Dakota now? Is it at one location?
I think it rotates all the time.
Does it? Yeah.
My favorite experience was also in Minot.
Yeah, we growing up, it was like Minot. They'd rotate between Minot and Bismarck, and Fargo was never in the picture. I think it was just too far east. And then by the time, some point along that way, when my brother was in high school, I loved it. They started shifting it to Fargo, and now Fargo really just owns the state wrestling tournament. They kind of half off the dome, and they do a great job. There's all the amenities, but can't compete with Minot in February, man. Just brutal up there.
Yeah, I don't know if I can agree with that.
Little rinky-dink dome, but good memories. I mean, that's what it's about, anyways, right?
Yeah, I always thought it was good for basketball. It was like a good size because sometimes they do state basketball at the Shack or up in Grand Forks there on the Betty, and just too big of it. Just too big of a venue. I don't know.
Yeah,
feels empty. It's kind of football, like state football at the Dome just feels, it's cool for the kids, but it's also like pin drop quiet in there.
It's like here in Minnesota, we've had some really good teams around this area, like Minneota and El Paso in the past actually played each other for a title. but that's really cool. So I was watching the Class A championship game a few years back. They always do it the Friday after Thanksgiving, and they host it in the US Bank Stadium. So they pan in, like, comes back from commercial break, and you pan into like the Wabasso fan base, and it's like you can see like 3 rows of people, and you're like, oh, cool, looks pretty. Looks like they brought a lot of people there and filled up. And then they show like an aerial view from like the top of the stadium, and it's like dead empty because it's made for about 70,000 people.
Yeah,
and you put about between both teams, there's like 2,000 people there.
Do they do anything like put up curtain off things, or they just leave it wide open?
I don't, outside of football, I don't know. Never really. I've gone to a concert there one time, but which would be a story for another top 5. I gotta, have that in there. Top 5 concert experiences. We're gonna delve into sometime down the road, but
might be a lot of street dances on my list. Johnny Holmes, Johnny Holmes, Firehouse.
All right, I might have to add some criteria so that we get you out the streets and delve into that creative mind a little bit. Because I too have seen Johnny Holmes many times, but I don't know if he cracks my top 5.
Oh, we'll see. Spoilers. Whoa.
It's a different type of experience, I suppose. Yeah.
Always had fun.
Awesome. Well, how was your weekend?
Good. Can't complain. I had to go shopping for new shoes for my son, which in and of itself is an experience. I decided to take both my children. My daughter is like a Tasmanian devil, so it's always a little concerning when I take them both in public by myself, but I thought I'd give my wife a break. She's just the master mom, and she just needs a time off once in a while. So went to Shields. That was the first call. I figured try the shoe thing, but there's tons of other stuff in Shields for the kids to do. So a spectacular fail. Man, my son's like a 13 and a half, which is like an odd shoe size. It's right there before they hit the young boys.
I mean, just go bigger. I mean, that's how my parents, weren't you raised that way? I mean, my parents were always like, I never had a pair of shoes that really fit, except for maybe a 2 or 3 month window at the mid point of their life.
Yeah, like once they were falling apart, they finally fit.
Like they should be, they should be about a size too big, and then you grow into them, and then eventually you wear them out. That's how I was raised.
Well, and yeah, I don't know if I remember that so much, but it's true. Like when I did pediatrics at the school, I mean, every kid had these huge floppy clown shoes on, and I just didn't want that for my son because I see him run around and he falls a lot. I think that's a byproduct of shoes.
That's every kid, dude.
Maybe he's just not coordinated. I don't know.
No, it's like that's every kid. We told you, I think I told you in the past, like, our son Gunner broke his radius like back in October, right?
Yeah.
And he's got these bone cysts that are kind of slowing down the healing, and they're preventing him from being back to any sport for a while. And his doctor, doesn't matter who it is, really sharp guy out of Sanford in Sioux Falls. He doesn't know what I do for a living, and I just kind of open up the opportunity for him to maybe do some PT or some rehab for his elbow, wrist, and hand, because he came out of a cast. He wasn't using it at all, and he goes, "Oh no, these kids are their own best therapist. They'll start moving it on his own." And he's not entirely wrong. However, like, I'm like, how much time have you ever spent with a kid? I didn't say this to him. I'm just talking about this because we're so passive aggressive anyways. And I'm like, any kid under like 10 is just falling all the time. And now in the time since then, every time he wipes out, which happens like daily, I'm like, yeah, he's his own best therapist. That's for sure.
Yeah, really protecting it in a graded exposure manner.
Oh my God. It's a miracle he hasn't rebroken a bunch of times over. And so I just think, I don't know if it's the shoe thing, maybe. I mean, you're probably right. It probably contributes a little bit more to it, but good God. We just had this, he turned 7 this last weekend, had a big Pokemon party. And tip of the cap to Pikachu right there in your mug. And there's just kids like they're running around screaming. It was a really loud party, but we were totally cool with it. It's like a bunch of 7-year-old boys. What do you expect? But there's kids wiping out, spilling every like upstairs, downstairs, going up the stairs. It just didn't matter. So I just think they take a while to grow in those frames.
Yeah, it's just want to give him every chance I can to succeed. But on the other end of the spectrum, he's like this sensory kid, so like anything on his body drives him insane. So we do have to buy large shoes for him. But I want to find this nice mix of like not so big they're like falling off his feet, but every kid shoe too nowadays is like elastic. Like they have laces, but they're just not, you don't tie them, you just slip them on.
They're fake.
Yeah, right. Way cooler than the Velcros I used to wear as a kid. Crossed them into an X. That was sweet. But my son, it drives him insane. They're way too tight on his feet, even if they're a size and a half too big. The length isn't the problem. The top sits too tight on him. So to find like a pair of kid shoes that ties now at that size, not that easy. Unless you want to go for like the $90, Jordans.
You can. There's a market out there.
It's surprising. I went to Foot Locker. Lots of kid shoes that were more expensive than the shoes I wear.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But like I said, there's a market. I've noticed it more and more with the students I take. Sneakers have become such a big thing. Like,
yeah.
I bought my first pair of like fancy designer sneakers. I had a student that convinced me it was an event because you have to like go on and register for these websites, and the shoes drop and you have to register to get a chance to buy the shoe, right? Like it's not like you're registering to win the shoe. It's like, we'll give you the opportunity to buy this shoe.
That is really intensive.
Yeah. So I went on and I bought this pair of shoes I had my eye on because it's one nice thing about being an adult with a decent job is
I gotta see these shoes.
You just
you're
buy things you want. But yeah, it was like they had all these sellers on this pair of shoes. And when I bought it, they were like, well, would you like them verified? Do I have to verify their shoes? Because apparently there's lots of fakes out there. So like the seller has to send the shoe to this company to verify that the shoe is actually the shoe you bought and not a cheap ripoff. It comes with these big clunky, reminds me of like the old Beanie Baby tags, like hard plastic case. It's like, this is your
shoe. Did you name it? So you named your shoe?
Yeah. Tinky Winky. They are purple.
Tinky Winky.
Yeah. But now I'm afraid to wear them.
Shoes.
Like,
don't you ever see if I were in your shoes? Like, I'm way too. I've learned this over the years too. I think I have way too dry of a sense of humor, and then sometimes I lose that sense of humor too. But it stays pretty dry, and I would be cracking down on that dress code, even if it was like just a total joke, just to mess with them. Like, especially if you're a college kid, you're dumping hundreds of dollars on a new pair of sneakers. Oh, I'd just love to have it in the clinic and be able to say, hey, by the way, you're not following our dress code, so I'm going to need you to go buy a pair of like nice wingtips or nice dress shoes.
Yeah.
So you're fitting it, and then watch their face just get like super white. And, God, I hate Nick Dolan. What a jerk.
Yeah, this is ruining my experience. So yeah, it's the shoe market. That's a wild thing. I mean, I had students flip around and buy shoes for $200 and sell them for $500 within like a week. It was crazy.
Well, hey, so our main topic today is lumbar spine. Now we're following up from last week and our overall like kind of theories and beliefs on it. I think we could segue into that thing. What contribution do you feel footwear makes to the lumbar spine? Because that's a little bit of a controversial topic. Because it's come and gone over the years. There's certainly a market for orthotics and specialized shoes. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm a guy who probably leans towards the less is more philosophy on all that stuff. I think in orthotics, not a bad thing. Definitely people that I don't know, with back pain, I probably don't see it as much. I can't say I'm just globally against orthotics, but I think it's like anything, you know, your feet hurt, your knees hurt, your hips hurt, your back hurt. You go in, you get an orthotic, and typically it feels better for most people. Again, some of my patients, I can just tell they're just sensory people and they're going to hate an orthotic that doesn't let them move. That would be me too. I like almost zero support in my shoes. If you look at work, I wear just like these flat loafers that have nothing.
You do. You wear like slippers to work.
Yeah, that's dress code. They're nice slippers.
You got like the little moccasins.
Yeah, they're like hard plastic on the bottom. There's zero support in them.
No, you're in compliance.
But what I've seen with orthotics anyways is that, like, whether it's for back or hip or knee or whatever, is like people wear them, right? They're supposed to get them changed out every, I don't know, 6 months, a year. Like I said, I don't order a lot of orthotics, don't do a lot of orthotic work, but like eventually people, at least for my patients with persistent pain, is eventually they get to the point where they're like, oh man, I don't know, like we got a new orthotist, or the company started making the same orthotic differently and it just doesn't work anymore. And then they go and try to find new orthotics, and they go through the rigmarole of like, nothing feels like my original pair of orthotics I got that helped. And it's like, well, I think your original orthotics did the job of offloading you a little bit. And now here you are offloading in a certain way for years. And now that offloading no longer works. It's like anything. We'll talk about posture. You know, you can avoid bad posture for a while and it feels good. But eventually, if you have military posture 24/7, that starts hurting. You can avoid bending, lifting, twisting for a while, but after a time, that just starts making your pain worse again. I think orthotics kind of fall into the same thing.
Yeah, even when I was doing more of them, I went through a phase where I actually, we had a good company called CJS Labs that we'd take the molds and then shoot them out to them, and fabrication, shoot them back, you know, and we'd do any retrimming and stuff. And they were a good product. They really were. And they had more of a flexible sole, which kind of meets where some of the criteria I'd like to see. But at the end of the day, I think even then, I'd only really recommend that they'd wear them, like if you're an adult, for sure. If you're an adult, wear them at work, wear them if you're more stationary, standing. But if you're still a weekend warrior, or you like to, you know, play a pickup game of basketball, you're in league sports, stuff like that, just leave them out, because your foot's meant to be flexible, and you know, you need some splay in your metatarsals. I kind of believe that. And for teenagers or youth as they're growing, I rarely ever actually molded kids for those, because I felt like their foot, they have so many other dynamics going on there. It's more than likely not the main issue, you know. And I know there's probably some people that would greatly disagree with that, but I think that, you know, the whole human body is built to be strong, but also flexible. And the foot needs to go through sequences of rigidity that it creates intrinsically, but then also periods in which, again, splay needs to happen, needs to be flexible in order for you to safely absorb shock too. And the more you wedge things in there, you lose that ability to absorb shock. And did you just create an issue where you're creating more tendinopathies or stress fractures? So I think that there's a blend there you got to take into consideration with the person's lifestyle as well.
For me, if I'm gonna suggest them, typically I'll do the off the shelf. Like if you're gonna be on your feet all day, go ahead and try something with some support, some cushion in it, maybe, just to see if it helps. You know, it's just so hard for me. These orthotics now, and these customs that people are getting are $300, $500, $1,000. Those are tough for me to be like, yeah, go get that. That'll,
and you know what's
the ticket.
Really interesting. There's a movement. There's a company that has created now a device. I'll just say it, a device that you slip around. It's like a kind of a thicker silicone that it's like a bunch of rings you slip between your toes now. And there's a little bit of a market in powerlifting and in CrossFitting to have that. And it actually creates more splay and widens the forefoot out as you squat. And so here you are going from one end to another, because nobody's really figured out what works and what doesn't, you know? And a lot of those topics become controversial. Like in an orthotic is very similar to like an Olympic lifting shoe that has like a, you know, it's a slant board built into it, basically a platform, you know. And even that gets very divisive because some people can squat in them and it takes all their knee pain away, and they allows them to be more vertical, so there's less strain on their lumbar spine, or so taking those shear forces away. And then other people absolutely refuse to. They think that that's compensating for, you know, issues at the you know, heel cord in your ankle. So then they're all about, you know, squatting barefoot or squatting in chucks, and you know what, to each his own. I mean, that, I think that's what at the end of the day, everybody's got a little different anatomy. So you just try to do the best as a therapist. You try to do the best you can with your recommendations, try to get them in the right, best position you can, and let their body do what it needs to do. But you can't fix everybody with the same magic wand.
Oh, and I think it's the message you give to people too. I don't have the article in front of me, and I don't remember what year it came out, but you know, it said you can change how people squat, you can change how people run, you can change how they lift. But the truth of the matter is, 6 months down the line, if you've taken their pain away, most, if not all, of your patients return to their previous habits if they're feeling good, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. You know, it's the problem is we give them this message early on, like, oh, you're squatting wrong, that's why you hurt. And then their pain goes away, they fall into their old habits, which is probably biomechanically how their body's most comfortable. They get hurt again. Then they keep falling back on I'm doing something wrong biomechanically in my life that's creating pain all the time. And that's probably not true. It's you overloaded yourself, or you did something too much, too fast. You know, it's typically just you didn't give your body time to adapt. The body's amazing. It blows my mind all the time what our bodies can do. But instead of the fact that, you know, you have these movements that are bad that you're doing, it's that you just didn't give your body time to adapt. And I think it's that message we have to continue to spread.
You know, one of our topics down the road is going to be like, I think we have like sports specification training, stuff like that. I think it depends on, I don't totally disagree with you, but I think it depends upon what's going on. Like how egregious is the movement fault that's taking place when somebody's, and I'll just say squatting or deadlifting, picking something up off the ground and tying it into your spine. Like if a kid, and my son Connor is a great example of this, if he defaults into a lumbar spine flexion because he lacks hip mobility to squat down, he consistently, number one, he doesn't actually do it right. He doesn't hit the proper depth. He just can't. And he's trying to compensate by leaning too far forward his spine. I feel like I can and should correct that through hip mobility and teaching him proper hip openers, you know, ways to basically posterior shift in there to add, you know, take care of some of that biomechanical component, you know, and get him on the right path. And I think even with some adults, if you catch it early enough and they're committed enough, they can get there. I feel like I'm kind of in that classification as well, because I used to go through sequences after, you know, I talked about my first back injury last week, and how for about every 6 months I would go back and I'd get some back spasms when I'd return to squatting, and I just refused to deadlift because every time I do it, it hurt my back. Instead of really taking the time to humble myself and rebuild it all back. So I waited and did that when I was like 32 or 33, and I started learning more about it, and actually taken the time to like video record myself from different angles, especially lateral views, and learning, okay, this is what I'm doing wrong and I need to correct it. And then some pre and post, it's pretty remarkable what you can change in your own body with the right feedback. So I think there's a scale to it. I think you're right. You're going to default, like running especially is so repetitious. If you think of every step being a rep, I mean, you're taking, you know, 10 to 15,000 reps every time somebody goes for a distance run. And they might not look the prettiest, but they might be just completely fine. So I think that's a little different beast altogether. But when you're talking about moving a heavy weight and putting those type of forces on, I feel like it's incumbent on us to maybe look at corrections where we can.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a biomechanical advantage to lifting certain ways. I mean, if your whole goal is to move a heavy weight, short distances. There's a better way to do it. It's just how do you
there's
get
no
that
perfect
message to somebody?
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's a perfect way.
No,
because everybody's hip anatomy is a little different, but there's certainly some common approaches that have served a great number of high level athletes very, very well. And I think that those are the keys and the paths you want to share with those emerging athletes, and then even your other community, because really a Florida waist lift, like I've said for years, Florida waist lift is just a deadlift. So you get the big air out of the room. You kind of use that terminology with people. I've used the term deadlift with like 75-year-old female patients who've recovered from back pain as well. So we're going to learn how to deadlift, and their eyes get really buggy. But you just kind of chuckle with them and you say, well, we're just going to work on recorrecting some of these habits so that you're not, defaulting into those same issues. And if you do it enough times, the idea should just be that becomes your new default pattern, but it takes a lot of work to get through it.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to, finding ways for people just to do things comfortably. And then how do you change that message? Because, somebody will come in, I see lifters and things, it's like, show me your deadlift. And nowadays they all film themselves lifting anyways. So that's super easy. They're like, check out this TikTok video of me squatting 400 pounds. And sometimes they do it really well. And you're like, okay, well, Sarah Sauerman says your back shouldn't hurt anymore. So I don't know. So like for me, it's all about, like you said, there's common patterns that seem to work for most people. Let's start there.
Yeah. And again, you're mentioning Shirley Sauerman, and I think that there's, we could really piss off some people if we have any PTs listening out there on, I have some other beliefs and some other groups that like to drink their own Kool-Aid pretty routinely. And they create, so again, I'm not about creating a fear of moving, right? Like you have to do it absolutely this one particular way, or else you're just going to blow your back up. I don't think that exists either. But you got to be able to move like this. So I had back-to-back evals yesterday afternoon, and my second one. So, and I got a kind of a common thing with both that I want to share, but they're both males. They're both kind of getting into middle age. One's 45, one's 54. And the guy with back pain, he was talking about how he can bend forward and has no issue. He can bend back and have no issue most of the time, but every now and again it bothers him. I said, well, that's kind of life. You should be able to flex forward in the spine. You should be able to extend backwards in the spine. You should be able to rotate. You should be able to side bend. You just don't want to live in any one of those, right? If you're forward flex too much, it puts too much, force on your spine, and let's just stay away from the biomechanical stuff, because I know that's divisive and a little debatable anymore. Where it used to be, you got to create posterior disc protrusions, stuff like that. I think that's been debunked a little bit. But either way, maybe it just puts too much. Your erectors are firing way too much because they're fighting gravity, right? That could be. But anyways, like I told him, I believe you just got to be able to move between all those patterns, but not live there. Be able to be a little more neutral.
Yeah, that's a super common theme. And as we talk about, when you get into a subjective with your persistent back pain patients, what are those questions you ask them to see what their beliefs are? I think that's big. And I think sometimes they're hard questions to have. Motivational interviewing is powerful, but I think most therapists feel weird asking it. And I see that common theme with students, and when students come back from clinicals too, is a lot of PTs out there want to be very directing the care and telling the patient, like, this is why you hurt, because you bent forward too much. I listened to what you said, and this is what's going on, versus, why do you think you still hurt? I think that's a powerful question for people, and it's
Casey, that's exactly what I was getting at. So my first guy's knee pain. He's the 54-year-old, and then the 45-year-old's got back pain, some shoulder pain. Both of them, and so this is just, I know it's not a huge track record, but it was so great to hear. With both of them, I asked that question, like, what do you think's bringing this on, right? Because they both are fairly idiopathic and very cyclical. They both said, well, I need to lose at least 30 pounds. And I'm like, whoa, magic formula right there. Because they're both correct. One guy probably could lose about 60. And we talked through that, you know, like, and obviously if you lose 30, 40, 50 pounds, a lot of that knee pain, a lot of that back pain goes away too. And I said, it's not just for the weight itself, but you know, it changes, your anthropomorphics change too. Your hips become wider when you're more obese. And then you create, you know, more straining angles. I do believe that, like I strongly believe that as far as, you know, regional interdependence and way things factor in with each other. But love the fact that they both acknowledged they were overweight or obese, and that was a strong contributing factor to their underlying causes. And in neither one was like a default excuse to like, okay, I'm just stuck with this. It was more like I need to stay committed on a program and actually lose some weight. And then I encourage that. You know, whereas, you know, even 10 years ago, I might have shied away from that topic as much. Like, oh, let's not make you feel bad. Where that comes from, you know, I'm going to treat your pain and then get you on your way because it's out of my scope to even talk about your weight. And now isn't it cool how much that's dramatically shifted?
It's a big factor. And I guess, yeah, we could go back and forth on how weight affects load and regional interdependence and alignment and things like that. But I think one thing that rings true in that statement, regardless of what you believe about the biomechanics, is that most people with persistent pain, it's behavior and it's mindset. There's something about losing weight, just that mindset change of getting some aerobic activity, eating healthy, sleeping better, like all these environmental contextual factors for patients is such a big factor. I mean, if you want to use the weight loss as the reason, the driving force, yeah, perfect. I think that's valid. But I think just the fact that they're starting to change their mindset on how their body operates and how they can feel better and creating positive habits, you know, and that sometimes is hard for the patients to understand if you just go from a like total contextual, like you're changing your mindset about your life and your body. And that's awesome. That's what you need to do right now. That's hard. But if you can, you know, wrap it up in this, hey, you're going to look better at the beach, mindset, I think that's powerful. You know, and
you're right. The mindset is the most powerful part of it. You know, all those other pieces are great, and they really are. You need the physiological benefits of it. You know, I really believe in that. Aside from the aesthetic stuff, like I think we can all acknowledge that, even though there's a shift in, you know, popular culture now and body image and all that stuff, but we need to be healthy too. I really believe that. It's kind of a dangerous precedent.
I would agree.
But have you ever talked to somebody who's really gone through a committed body transformation, like where they've lost, you know, 80, 100 pounds?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking to a patient about this the other day. I went through, like in grad school, like a 80-pound weight loss. And the interesting part for me in that thing was like body dysmorphia. It just blew my mind. As I kept shedding weight, I kept feeling like I was gaining weight. It was the weirdest thing. Like the more weight I lost, the more weight like I felt I had to lose.
And you were trying to lose weight?
I was. I mean, it was initially it was just I have no money. The gym was free at college. You know, I didn't have TV. Where am I going to watch football and basketball? I'll go to the gym, hop on the treadmill. You know, initially it started with, well, I'll just walk for an hour on the treadmill while I watch the football game. Just kind of snowballed, right? I started to lose weight. I felt better physically, you know, and I thought it was cool. Like I was never a runner in my life. And all of a sudden I'm running 15, 20 miles, you know, and it just snowballed. And then it became a weight loss thing. Like, let's see how far I can go, right? I think a lot of us in our profession anyways like to push our bodies in some way, shape or form, you know, whether it's mentally push yourself, physically push yourself. So it became this thing where I was like, let's see how much weight I can lose. Probably to the point where on my second clinical, I almost started to kind of dive into exercised anorexia a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where it was like, oh man, I had 300 calories for lunch today. Like I got to hit, you know, an extra 3 miles tonight. And it was so weird. I got down to the point where like, you know, you could see my ribs.
Yeah.
You know, like,
so you're getting down there.
Yeah. You know, if you look from me from behind, it wasn't muscle. It was just ribs you saw and scapula. And to me, if you would have asked me, I probably would have told you at that time, man, I'm still, if I can get down another 20, you know.
Yeah.
Like that was my mindset. It was crazy. So that's a bad example of that, you know.
I was going for something more positive, but
Yeah.
thank you for putting the storm cloud of sadness around.
Yeah, well, it just totally opened my eyes to body dysmorphia because I don't know, it was weird.
No, you're right.
I looked
definitely...
in the mirror and people told me I looked ill, and I thought like, man, I look ill because I'm so overweight still.
Yeah,
so it was weird.
Yeah, you could definitely take it too far. Where I was going to go with it is I've known a couple people, my mom included, who after the passing of our grandfather about 11 years ago, she had dropped about almost 50% of her body weight.
Wow.
And then maintained it. And then some other individuals that I've known who've either had like lap band surgery and stayed committed to it and had done successfully. Where I'm going with that is it creates this like a whole nother level of confidence though. So you've basically failed the majority of your life. You failed to achieve this goal, and the goal of being like healthy or look aesthetically pleasing to the opposite sex, whatever it is, with some combination of that. And you've more than likely tried and failed at numerous approaches. And then you finally, you kind of, as you were describing your story, it seems like you kind of fell backwards into it. Like it's just something that started happening. And
it wasn't a conscious behavioral change decision per se. It just snowballed. I mean,
So going back to all the psychosocial factors that we were alluding to, when you have that commitment, you're going through it. I think you see it just adds a whole otherworldly level of confidence, not just in the fact that now they know that they can control their appetite a little bit better than they thought they could. They can get up and work out every morning where you thought I was never going to be that person and I was always just going to sleep in more. So that spills over into everything else that you're doing, whether it spills over into the mastery of your own body. Like, can I overcome this, or do I need somebody else to fix it for me? I think that's very powerful. I've been through, cycles myself, just through being done with sports and messing around with my body and just trying different things. It's kind of like you, like it started out really fun. And I think about 7 years ago, both Michelle and I were on this, kind of a good nature challenge. And I dropped about 35 pounds. And then before I knew it, it turned into 40, and I was below 200 pounds for the first time since, I really say since like I was a freshman in high school. Because I'm not going to count like cutting in college. I cut to 197, but you don't really live there. You make it for like, an hour and then you're back over 200. But
it's such a healthy way to live.
Oh, it really was. But
spitting into a cup and not drinking for like a whole day.
Yeah. So back when I was in the kind of the end of that one, because you're right, it does become addicting. And you're not always living in it. You don't always are aware of that, I guess. And Michelle would tell me over and over, she's like, God, you're too skinny. You're too skinny. And now when I look back at pictures, and it was only for about maybe 2 months where I was at this like real lowest of like low weight. And you're right, my eyes were sunken really in. It's amazing what that does to like your orbitals, like how much weight loss just affects that. And my cheeks were really prominent. And I didn't like the way I looked now. Especially. So you kind of also learn to land on, okay, what's my healthy walking weight? What do I feel most comfortable at?
Yeah, what's
that allows me to do stuff. Plus, I'm a meathead enough where I think what really pushed me as much as anything at the time, I went back to the gym. I was doing a lot of distance running, doing a lot of halves back then. And went back into the gym to lift some weights, and I was like just struggling to squat like 225 and struggling to bench the same, and I was like, crap, I gotta get some muscle back on. And then I just rebounded back. I think I put on like 40 pounds over the next 2 years in like muscle and with a little bit of chub.
Yeah, it's amazing what your body, like you have this like preset, number that your body likes to be at. And you got to live there a long time to reset that. And I luckily never hung out that was like 160 at my smallest. I never hung there long enough to really reset my thermostat to that level. But I think the breaking point for me and my wife was like one morning I put her pants on. And I'm like, hey, look, I can fit into your pants. Isn't that cool? And she's like, that's not cool at all. Like,
yeah.
And then that started the gears turning. Like I wore a small shirt, like my shirt side was small. And I was like, like the numbers don't add up. Right. Like I feel so overweight still, and I'm wearing like a size 26 waist with a small shirt. I was like,
wow.
yeah,
I can say I've never been down that low.
yeah, it was weird. And like I said, I was 160 pounds, so it's not like I was that small. But I mean, I was, but 160, a lot of it is just like you said, your body changes when you're big. So I had this bone structure of a 240-pound person, at 160 pounds. So even though I still, my BMI was, at 160, I was probably in the range of healthy.
Yeah.
But just based on everything else, organ size was probably bigger, bone size was bigger just from being big at that point, I'd been probably over 200 since, sophomore year of high school. So, my body had adapted to being that big, and then you pull off all that weight, and it's just interesting. But yeah, we kind of burned through our back topic again, but that's all right. Yeah. I think it was a good conversation, but we'll wrap it up. Today,
it all just ties to the spine. It's maybe, I don't think we're too far off. Maybe that's just me trying to pat ourselves on the back. But at the end of the day, it's not just one thing. I think we've expressed that repeatedly. I mean, it takes a whole life. There's a whole lifestyle change that needs to take place if you really want to master it and take control of it.
Yeah, I think persistent pain, whether it's subacromial impingement syndrome, rotator cuff pain syndrome, patelliformal pain syndrome, non-specific low back pain, whatever scary name you want to give this stuff. I think it all comes down to environmental factors, contextual factors on top of those physical structures. I think we maybe swung a little too far into the getting away completely from nociceptive and neurogenic pain. I think we need to remember those are still structures there that are pain generating. We maybe shifted a little too far, but anyways, I think that, it's a conversation we're going to continue to have, because there's lots of good topics on treatment, and, we talk about surgery candidates and things. So we'll cover that stuff in the future. But we'll wrap her up today with our top 5. So today is top 5 movies that are better the second time around. We didn't give ourselves as much criteria on this. So for me, I truly went with movies that were significantly better the second time I watched them, but didn't necessarily have to be movies that maintain that. Movies on my list, it was I watched it the second time, it was way better, and that was all I ever needed to see that movie. Versus some movies, just consistently get better over time. I think a lot of
which is another topic.
Yeah.
So that's going to be another topic. It's going to be like down the road. I have another top 5 would be I think what you're talking about, most easily rewatchable films.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. You're right. It's just and it could be different criteria. I have in my top 5, I actually had about 11 movies written down yesterday. I was going through them last night with my wife, Michelle. And I have different reasons as to why they were better a second time as well. Can be just a plot surprise that allows it to make more sense. But in other cases, it could just be you actually, I'll get into that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say my list definitely has a theme. You'll see it. But like I said, we'll just roll into it. I'll start with mine. When we talk about my honorable mentions, a lot of comedies fall into this thing. I didn't feel like any of them made my top 5, but if we're looking at comedies that were significantly better the second time I watched them, to make honorable mention for me would have been Napoleon Dynamite and Step Brothers. 2 movies that maybe initially I didn't like that much, and the second time around it clicked a lot more. And then you just enjoyed them more. But so those didn't make my list just because I felt like they weren't significantly better the second time, and they were a slow burn movie that maybe the 4th or 5th time they were I know every line now and I can just sit and giggle. But my number 5 on the list will be my first Christopher Nolan on my list. Will be on my list, but not my last. Number 5 on my list would be from 2006, The Prestige. Just a cool movie. I saw it in the theaters. I knew nothing about it when I went to see it in the theaters. So I didn't even know what it was about. I didn't even know it was about magicians when I went to see it. My buddy's like, hey, we're sitting around playing Nintendo Wii. Hey, let's go do a movie, I'm bored. And So I went to it, and it, like, my mind was open to it. It was just a cool movie. I think the ending was cool because, like, it brings in this mysticism with Hugh Jackman's character and Tesla, and you're like, oh man, this is crazy. And then,
Such a good film.
The reveal at the end is like, oh, he's not using magic. It's just a stupid trick. I can't believe you didn't fall for it. And they gave you all these hints along the way in the movie that like Christian Bale's character is a twin, and you just don't notice it. And then you watch it the second time. This movie is 5 on my list because it's not like that crazy of a thought process. And when you go back and watch the movie, I don't think it changes how you see the movie. But watching it the first time, you're just so into trying to figure this out, and you think there is some sort of mystical thing. And then the second time through, I just got to watch their performance and really appreciate as actors what Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman did in the movie. And it just was so enjoyable the second time through. And yeah, great performances. Michael Caine was just awesome. He's always awesome. I mean, he's just sitting there, in the background, knowing everything. And
he's been like just about every Nolan film since then.
Yeah. Right. I probably could have did a top 5 of just his movies, but
same here. And as you're talking, I'm almost like, God, do we need to move away from a top 5 format and count down to just say like who's on your list, and then we can just jump in, because so many times I want to piggyback off what you're talking about. But my honorable mention was Step Brothers.
Oh, okay.
And the criteria for Step Brothers in this case is I actually truly really enjoyed it the hell out of it the first time we went to it in the theater. But because of the theater experience, you miss so many of the give and take dialogue lines. And I remember when it came out, to DVD, whatever, 6-7 months later, we watched it again, and you pick up on so many lines you missed, and it's even better. So that was my criteria for that one. There's no big twist or anything like that you get better. It's not layered. It's just funnier because you missed stuff the first time in that audience experience. So loved it. Very rewatchable film as well. I don't know why.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. My number 5 is my first Christopher Nolan film. Okay. It is Interstellar. And I also just truly loved it the very first time I saw it. However, seeing it again later on when it came out, you pick up on so many more of the layers and the details to the story that you're because it's a sci-fi film, and you're ingrained, you're kind of engrossed in so much of the special effects and kind of the theatrics that go with it. You miss some of the more nuances of it. I think it definitely has grown with me over time. Really truly love it. Love the fact it's centered around, I mean, you have this huge sci-fi idea of the world ending and needing to find a place for humans to continue to exist. But at the same time, there's like this real heart of the movies, like his relationship with his daughter. However, you could also make the weird argument that, like, why does he not really care about his son, though? I mean, it's just like there.
Yeah, there was some things about that movie that I thought was really good. And maybe I do need to go back and rewatch it. You'll see a lot of the, my movie watching career, like once Netflix was a thing, my amount of rewatching movies has significantly dropped. And Interstellar is probably one of those that fell into that for me. I watched it once and it just didn't trigger with me like desire to watch it again. I think near the end, and maybe I should watch it again because I don't really understand what's going on. But he goes into whatever the fourth dimension or whatever. Totally. He's like in the bookshelf, and I'm like, what is happening here? I don't know.
Even the second time, it doesn't make a whole lot more sense. The second time, but it's more digestible because you pick up on like a little bit of maybe how he's communicating with his younger daughter, with his daughter, and stuff like that. Definitely some huge concepts, and I think in between too, I should acknowledge. In between, I watched this really cool documentary on how they made it and how they brought in all these theoretical astrophysicists from around the country to really try to make it as plausible as possible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. So they really tried to follow as much science as you can, but then all of a sudden you're in the bookshelf and there's like like plaid patterns and stuff like that. But
that got me a little bit because I I'm not like a huge astrophysics nerd or anything, but I think just the time relativity is such an interesting concept to me.
Interesting concept. And on that note, like they're like on par with meteorologists too, because talk about a career where you never necessarily have to be correct. You just have a belief in something. You know, like right. I think like, this is with theoretical astrophysicists, they just, well, I believe space is this far. I believe we're all this far away, but nobody can ever really prove it.
Yeah, that's a lot of things that at least now we don't have the capabilities to test, right? Like I ran it through the system. It seems like it works.
Well, that's 326 million miles away, give or take.
Yeah, right.
Who's gonna be like, no, it's not. It's,
like I believe at the end of the universe, there's a magical unicorn dragon that runs everything. Go ahead and prove me wrong.
Yeah.
So moving on the list. Interstellar. That's a good one. I should rewatch it. My number 4 from 2001 is a little more of an independent movie called Donnie Darko. It's super cool movie about fate, predetermined destiny. There's this creepy rabbit. If you've ever seen the cover, like he's throughout the movie, you're wondering what the heck's going on. I think this movie's a little lower on my list just based on like it kind of lays it out for you as the movie goes. You know, if you're perceptive enough, you kind of see where it's going. It's not, I don't think you're necessarily surprised by the ending. You are a little bit, but it's not as much of a surprise. But the second time through, again, I think your headspace is a little better for it. You're not so, because it's kind of a weird movie. Like the acting's weird. Jake Gyllenhaal's kind of weird in it.
He wasn't really,
he wasn't necessarily a likable main character in the movie. I don't know if anybody in the movie was overly likable, which is maybe why it's a good movie because it's realistic. But it's definitely, I enjoyed it. I've watched it multiple times just because I like that thought process, that thought experiment of like, are we in charge of ourselves? Is it all just going to happen no matter what we do? So it's an interesting movie. It's my number 4. I think the acting was good. I think the idea was good. Application wasn't good enough to get into my top 3.
I would, interesting story with Donnie Darko, because I got into that in the college phase and, really super dug it when it came out, really liked it again. And back then, I think you mentioned Netflix changing that. I think just as you grow up, we don't have the same time abilities to like rewatch films over and over. Mm-hmm. I think, but I re-engaged it like a year ago during COVID and with my son Connor. And I got through the whole thing and I'm like, I didn't like it as much as I used to like it. Mm-hmm. And I saw more holes in it. So that's like another topic we come up with, like a movie that's maybe like not as good as you remembered it or something like that.
Just because one of those movies as like a college kid, you're like, oh man, this is mind blowing. And I would agree with you. Yeah. I would say after probably about the 3rd or 4th watching, it started to lose its luster. It was definitely, like I said, based on this criteria, it would hit my list, but it's probably a movie now I would not have much desire to rewatch because you're right. There is a lot of holes in it. And
interesting concepts, but it's like he just couldn't really finish the deal with some of those concepts in my opinion.
Totally agree.
Like what was the like the wormhole abyss, like, liquid wormhole through the chest leading him around. Like I just inserts that. And,
is it destiny? Is that what the wormhole is? All right. Yeah. I mean, so it leaves it too open-ended in some ways, but too concrete in others. So like I said, great second watch, but it doesn't hold up.
Yeah. For time's sake, we better move on.
Yeah.
My number 4 is Office Space, another comedy. It's the final comedy on my list. A little different than Step Brothers, just because I think it was how old I was when it first came out. Very dry, right? So, and and I hadn't really worked. You hadn't really been out in the real world, to really identify like what he's getting at, right? I was a little too young to understand those concepts. And then a couple of years later, I got into it towards kind of the midpoint of college and loved the hell out of it. Still do. So much of it holds up really, really well. But yeah, initially the first time seeing it, I don't know if I laughed more than like twice.
Yeah, it's not a laugh out loud movie per se. I mean, there's no, and then it just builds, right? Mike Judge, I would say Idiocracy follows that same formula. Like you watch it and you're like, he didn't really hit it. And then you watch it 2 or 3 times and you're like, oh man, like it all wraps together. So yeah, that's a good one.
First time you watch, first time you see it, like I remember laughing at the Diedrich Bader character, the neighbor.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just funny. He's just making fun of a redneck guy who's very simple, But what's cool about it, by the end of the day, he's not all that bad, right? He's kind of showing like there's some points to life where you don't need to keep, keep flying up the corporate rungs of the ladder. If you're just happy with what you're doing, you're content being outside, getting some fresh air and contributing,
Yeah. All he needs, man, 2 chicks, 1 time. Right?
That's what he'd do if he had $1 million.
Yeah. Like that was happiness for him, right?
But like the final lines of that movie, it's like F&A, man.
That's definitely one I would have to reconsider on my list a little harder. I went away from comedies maybe too much because that is a really good choice.
That's my number 4.
All right, my number 3 makes the list just because of, I don't know, story's really good, but the filming style is so cool that I think the first time rolling through it, you don't appreciate it. It's not like a mega hit, but it's one of those movies.
You've got your hooks in me. What is it?
2010, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I grew up, I was a video game kid. This movie was filmed, it's a real movie, but it's got like all these video game undertones and rock music undertones. And I think the first time you watch it, it's just like this visual overload. I mean, they're overlaying video game stuff, he's got hit points and there's coins popping up and it's just really well filmed. And I just don't think you appreciate it the first time through. The second time through, you can just soak the whole thing in and just get all those little pieces. It's a really entertaining movie. It's one of those that maybe 3-4 watches in, you start to notice the points in that movie that drag on. Once you've gotten over the luster of like how cool it's filmed and the idea of it, it does drag on a little bit. It's not a huge repeat watcher for me. But I would say the second, third time I watched it, like I watched it the first time and I had to go out and buy it on Blu-ray. Yeah, that's back in the day.
Blu-ray, yeah.
It's just the DVD wasn't good enough, man. I needed this sucker in clarity. So, that's my number 3. It's just, if you haven't seen it, it's cool just to watch how it was put together.
Good flick. My number 3 is, and it's the first of this final trend. You're going to see this in all of them. It's Shutter Island from about 2010. DiCaprio. I think Scorsese directed that one.
I believe so.
Scorsese's like first foray really into like thriller horror. But here's where I'm going with this. It's my final 3 will all have a trend of like where the twist at the end of the movie makes the film better when you go back and rewatch it, and it makes it more understandable. And as opposed to movies that almost get too cute with the twist at the end, that really just piss you off because you wasted 2 hours of your life. Apparently none of it mattered.
Yeah, like just jam the ending into your face.
I'm going to give you 2 examples, bro. 2 movies that still just piss me off to this day.
Oh God, I hope they're not on my list.
Ocean's 12.
Okay.
Because I love Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 13, but Ocean's 12, where you get through the whole movie and you find out, they stole the Fabergé egg at the very beginning, and everything you just watched, none of it mattered.
Pointless, and it was filmed like completely different than the other movies. Tried to be this artsy thing.
And then I'm going to say my other one. I'm going to give you my other one, and then I'll explain like really, really why that even pissed me off anymore. Because now you see me.
Okay.
Where at the end you find out Mark Ruffalo's been pulling all the strings and orchestrating it and everything like that. Interesting, Ruffalo's also in Shutter Island. You should have just stuck to that. But what it presupposes is that who's ever masterminding all this, they know 100% unequivocally how every character is going to react to a given situation. And they just let the dominoes fall and everything's going to work out according to their master plan. And it just, it's trying to be too cute. It's robbing the audience of anything that they've just really watched for that time, and all those little twists and turns and stuff like that happen within the film. And then at the end, you're like, oh, by the way, none of it really mattered because this guy was really pulling all the strings, or like in Ocean's 12, they already did the whole thing. And so then why would you go through all the problems and the hassle of like recreating another egg and trying to get the French guy to go and steal it and follow down that thing? Why wouldn't you just take it and be done with it?
Yeah,
No,
make it more work than it necessarily feels.
Go through all these, get guys arrested, stuff like that, get them off the hook, and I mean, it's so implausible and just foolish.
Yeah,
so Shutter Island does not do those things.
No, yeah, better movie. With the exception of maybe you can argue like, okay, why would they let him, continue to pretend that he's, still like solving mystery? But we do that. But in a plausibility standpoint, we do that with dementia to a point. We let people live where they believe they're living. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good movie. Filmed great. DiCaprio's awesome. I don't know. Creepy. It was super creepy. The atmosphere was great. That movie just didn't click with me though. I felt like, again, like I said, Scorsese's first foray into it, I felt like a lot of the creepiness was forced. And like I thought I was like being told I should be like creeped out and scared in that movie more than I actually needed to be. And then you get to the end and you get the twist and you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Big twist too.
Yeah. I don't know. The twist didn't hit me that hard. I was like, at some point, I don't know, you just started to feel like this guy was going insane, and surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it's less that he's insane. I think it's finding out like what drove him there.
Well, yeah.
To me, anyways. Yeah.
No, it's a good movie. It was on my short list for sure. When you talk about things that piss you off on this list from the similar thing, I feel the same way with like the Saw movies. It's like, I don't know, you set all this stuff up and then they keep shoehorning it every movie afterwards. Like, oh, look how smart we were. Like, we knew this stuff in movie 1 and movie 6. And it's like, no, you didn't. You just reworked the movies to matter.
And you guys made money, so you kept,
yeah. You stole all the luster from the first movie, which would have made my short list too, and just ruined it.
You know what? I didn't even think of the first one. And full disclosure, in its entirety, the first Saw is the only Saw movie I've ever seen in its entirety.
Yeah. And
the rest of them I've seen parts, and I'm not a big fan of that genre where it went, with like the torture porn genre. Mm-hmm. But the first one, awesome twist though. Still a little implausible,
Oh, it gets worse as you get into.
I bet.
I'm a horror guy, so I've seen like every one 5 times. But...
So you mean like now there's 3 dead guys on the floor that are all gonna like not be dead?
It turns out the mouse the whole time was the killer hiding at the corner. Oh. No. So moving on to number 2 on my list, my second Christopher Nolan movie from 2000. Also, really my introduction to Christopher Nolan was Memento. Guy Pearce, Carrie-Anne Moss, Joe Pantoliano. Man, that movie was awesome. Still to this day, I can watch that movie. Even if you know everything, I think the acting is cool. It starts out crazy, finishes crazy, the build up the whole time. And on second watches, even like the stories of I'm probably going to slaughter the character, but Sammy Jenkins, where he talks about the guy who's got the memory loss and he's given his wife insulin injections and she ends up dying because he doesn't remember. When they flash back, like that's probably Leonard, right? That probably happened to him. They never come out and say it explicitly, but like just seeing that emotion on his face. Joey Pants is just awesome. He's just a cool guy. He brings so much energy to that movie. And just the setup, I don't know, is it plausible? That level of retrograde amnesia is pretty rare, but the thought experiment's crazy, and the pictures and the tattoos and little things, and he's having the flashback of successfully finding out his wife's killer, and the blank spot on his chest says we did it or whatever. Like, just little cool things like that throughout that whole movie. I love that movie. My mind was blown when I saw it.
So I fancy myself a strong Christopher Nolan fan. I've never seen Memento in its entirety.
Oh my goodness.
That's I know.
I'm gonna have to end this Zoom meeting.
I fully understand that if I saw the movie fully from start to finish, it would probably be on my list. But because I haven't, I couldn't put it on there. I've seen it. It's one of those that I picked up on TV, but I got into him a little bit later. I actually got into Nolan as next film, Insomnia. But I never got it, never fully completed Memento. But I know as you're talking about it, I've read everything about like
Yeah.
You know, what makes it so good, and I just gotta watch it.
Yeah, it's a hit, man. It's a hit. It's not to reveal too much on my list, but it's my number one Christopher Nolan movie. I mean, I don't know if he ever did anything as good since. So,
well, my number two, you're fair to have that opinion, because my number two is The Prestige from 2006. A film that, and probably because the first time I watched it, I enjoyed it, but I still, at the end, I lend into what I was just complaining about a moment. Like, I'm like, oh, I think it's trying to be a little too cute, you know? The difference with this one, again, is that he executes it so much better. So you go through a second time, and once you know that Christian Bale truly is a twin, it's like, wow, okay, there's so many little things you pick up on, and you're trying to identify, and then you play a little game with yourself. You're like, which one's which, right? Which scenes is he this brother, and which scenes is he the other brother, right? And the only thing that still, like, maybe I don't totally get is the cloning of Hugh Jackman, but it almost makes up for it, because it plants that really dark question of like, God, how ethical is this guy who's always, you're watching this and you think he's like kind of the hero.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
it totally changes at the end.
And you're like, wait, God, he's sadistic. He's like killing all these clones of himself, you know, just to like compete as a magician. So, and
then storing them, like, just throw the bodies away.
Yeah.
Being a serial killer of yourself.
Yeah, but great film. I know you had it at 5. I got it at 2. Really enjoyable going back and watching that one.
Yeah, I love like, do you know if you're going to be the clone? Like, do you know if you're going to end up in the tank or not? Like,
yeah,
Jackman, like, that's a pretty wild thought process of like, when I step into that machine, like, the end result of this is one of us is dying. Is it going to be me?
Is it like he says every time, right? Is that what he says? His answer. Yeah. Great performances, though. A strong film. Totally kind of an underrated Christopher Nolan film, too. I think it gets forgotten about with, you know, neither one of us mentioned Inception. I probably could have put that on there, but I just enjoyed it too much the first time anyways.
Yeah, you went in, by the time Inception came out, you knew Christopher Nolan. You knew you were going to have to sit down and like pull this movie in from start to finish. So I don't think it's necessarily that much better the second time around.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think you could watch the ending of Inception a million times and still ask yourself the same question you did the first time.
He made it that way.
Yeah.
Right? He's even said that. Like, people who try to say, oh, he's still dreaming, he's awake. No, you're like, you don't know. He made it that way.
Yeah. So I don't know if it changes it much the second time. So that was definitely one, you know, the first movie that comes to my head when we did this list. But then I was like, God, you know, it was so good the first time. So my number one on my list is not Inception. It's a movie that, I guess, again, as we go through this list, mind-blowing. There are so many things in it. I had never even heard of this movie when I watched it. 5 minutes into this movie, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. There was flashes on the screen. I was pausing my DVD to see, like, was that, like, did I blink? Is that weird?
In the same movie?
I don't know. 1999. David Fincher, Fight Club.
It's like impossible not to have it, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, the first time I saw the big flash on the screen and you pause your DVD and it turns out to be pornography placed in the movie, I'm like, what am I doing?
I thought you were referring to the splicing of Brad Pitt at those sequences.
It took me later to see those little things. Like, you're like, oh man, Brad Pitt's in all these scenes. Like, it's so crazy. Like, and it was filmed awesome. It was dark. You know, David Fincher, I believe it
Fincher's
already.
So good.
He had done 7 at that time, I believe, right? So you're coming off of that. You thought you knew what you were getting into. This is going to be dark and gritty. And then it's like, you're just like watching this story about these two guys, like, slowly doing nothing, you know. It was like, and then all of a sudden it just steamrolls at the end. And you're like, how did all this stuff happen? Well, this guy's like just kind of hanging out in this dilapidated house. And it's like, wow, turns out, like, you never sleep, man. You're just doing all this crazy stuff and you're sleeping, you're setting everything up, and you watch it again and how characters interact with him. And like when they're in scenes together, how they like maybe ignore like Tyler Durden, even though he's the one talking, they're, you know, talking at Ed Norton. Like, you don't notice that stuff the first time through and you're like, oh man, it's still to this day. And for me, this movie is totally rewatchable. I don't think it ever loses its luster. Rest in peace, Meatloaf. Probably his best movie performance. He is now Robert Paulson in death.
His name was Robert Paulson.
My mind was blown when I watched this movie. I think I was in high school when it came out, and Again, had it on DVD. Man, I would have bought it on Blu-ray if they had that out at the time.
If the technology existed.
Yeah. There's probably still stuff in that movie I haven't noticed, but just the setups and I mean everything. It's awesome. You can watch YouTube videos all day on crazy connections in that movie.
Obviously, my number one. I'm pissed that you got to go first in order. You took about that. Everything you said is correct. I mean, I agree with it. It's a film where if you watch it, you know, you get through to the end and you're like, I enjoyed it the first time I saw it, and I was just graduating high school, and it was like, oh, this is cool, right? And then you go back almost immediately. I think I rewatched it the next day, and you're like, this is even better because you know the twist and everything you said, like the way the characters kind of react to Ed Norton, the way they react to Brad Pitt throughout the film, it all makes more sense, and he does it just so well. Also, a young Jared Leto.
Oh,
you know,
he's
cutting his
too
teeth.
Too pretty.
Just gets the hell beat out of him.
Had to ruin something beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good film. Interestingly enough, it just came up in the news. I don't know if you saw that in the last couple of weeks. Apparently, and I don't know why this is now being filmed in China or was released in China now, but
they censored the ending.
They changed the end to where instead of like the bombs exploding, and him just watching it to a great Pixies song, you know.
Oh yeah, Where's My Mind?
Where's My Mind? I mean, it fits the movie, right? But instead of that, it's I guess the screen cuts to black and it says Tyler Durden was arrested by the government. They stopped the bombs from exploding. Yeah.
I saw that. I was like, that's so crazy. I don't know.
I almost laughed when I read that.
Talked about censorship off podcasts. It's like, that's so crazy to live somewhere that's like, oh, just this is the end. It's beautifully wrapped up.
We're going to change this for you.
Yeah. Completely ruins the movie, you know?
Yeah.
And this movie's kind of cool because the twist, they give you a lot of time to digest the twist before the movie ends. You know, I mean, he literally has to fight himself. I mean, it's cool, right? Like,
kind of tells you the confidence that Fincher had that it was going to work.
Yeah, and like, hey, this movie's just a good movie. Like, I don't have to surprise you at the last second with this thing. Like, now you get 20 minutes to sit here and go, this is crazy, and I want to finish this ride. Like, you know, it doesn't leave a lot of like, now I got to digest what could happen. It's like, he wrapped it up, man. That's one thing none of these movies do great is wrap it up. And I mean, Memento kind of wraps it up, but they wrap it up at the beginning instead of the end. It's kind of weird, but
a little different. Yeah. So good list, man. A lot of overlaps this time around. Really cool.
Yeah. It was probably my biggest list, but you know, when it comes down to it, good movies are good movies.
Definitely. Well, I suppose that kind of wraps it up for another week of TT Shop Talk.
Yeah, I think we'll look at, maybe, spoiler alert, maybe having a special guest next week, episode. So surprise. Stay tuned. After that, we'll probably resume our back pain talk. You know, we got to get into some treatments and some referral patterns and surgeries, and we still got a lot of stuff to digest on back pain. So we'll continue that after our special guest. So until next time, see you, everybody. I'm Casey Hansen.
I'm Nick Doling.
All right. Get better every day, everybody.